Gardening between a golf course and the ocean creates some challenges. But Mac Houfec and her traveling plants are up to the task in her Virginia Beach garden. The story of the garden and the gardeners, next on A Gardener's Diary.
But to tender-hearted Mac, they're all just travelers.
Mac, we're in Virginia Beach, although it's a little nippy for Virginia Beach.
It is chilly today.
But it's beautiful and green and lush, and we're standing in the front of your house, which is a bit formal, and we're looking out at the road, which is rather informal, that wonderful bed of vinca and your trees coming up there. There's not an evergreen screen, but you've got a nice feeling of being enclosed, and still we can sort of peek out.
Right. I thought the house reminded me of a European home, so I wanted to do the greenery with a European flair to it. The hardscape was here when we moved here, but we did change quite a bit the overall feel of the front.
And I like the way across the front of the house, you don't have your classic foundation plants.
No, it's just a different look. The holly ferns are evergreen, so they look great all year long. And the abrevieties and the boxwoods are green all year. And the coral bark maple.
That's a great maple.
Yeah, and so that's really pretty even when it's barren. The bark is so colorful.
So you've got your good formal bones, and then you have a little fun by bringing in this tree here.
Bones is the word we use a lot, because when we found this home, it wasn't the home that I loved as much as the garden, and the bones in the garden just make it so much fun.
And
so,
I love this
camellia,
topiary. Was that growing that form, or did you limb it up as a tree?
We limbed it up.
Well, it really highlights the tree, or it's a shrub, but it looks like a tree in this setting.
There's about every variety of camellia around here.
Well, it's a very welcoming entrance.
Thank you. The property is 2 acres, and I wanted to move here because the home that we were in before was lovely. I loved my garden, but I had outgrown it. I had no more space for another plant, and I decided I'm too young to not have any more space for gardening, which is something I love to do. So we have lived here for almost 5 years. The back was all azaleas, which were pretty much 50 years old, hollies, camellias. And so I've added a lot of beds and gardens, and it's been fun to do that. Erica, this is the Charleston garden that we put in less than 3 years ago.
Like Charleston, South Carolina?
Like Charleston. I have a son that went to the College of Charleston, and we'd go down there and visit a lot, and I fell in love with their small gardens, the gates that are so welcoming, the wall, and the water feature. And so we took out gumball trees and had a landscape designer help me with the design, and he did a great job, I think.
So you actually built the wall and the whole, you created the whole Charleston experience.
Whole effect, yes, yes. Including a little bit of moss hanging from the tree in a basket.
That's fun.
One of the prettiest features, I think, is the Styrex Abacia. And it is in bloom right now, and it is very fragrant.
One of my favorite trees.
I love that tree.
And I like the standards, this George Tabor azalea that's been trained to grow on a single trunk.
Right.
And they really are they're critical to the formal elements, I think, of this garden. I've seen this azalea in other gardens, but how long will it stay in bloom for you?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks, that's pretty good. And then you've got this solid green mass for the rest of the year.
The rest of the year, and the hydrangeas will come up next. So there's always color out here.
But George Tabor, that's a good popular variety for southeastern gardens.
Yes, it is. It's very southern.
People probably wonder what that is, and I think that's just a reversion where it's gone back to, because George Tabor is a cultivar, one of the parent plants. Now, will you cut that out?
I don't think so. I like the variety in here, just a little bit of it. I won't let it overtake because that wouldn't be George.
Well, I wonder who this is.
I don't know.
George's cousin.
That's a good thing to find out. Creeping Jenny is my ground cover, and it creeps a lot.
It does. You don't call that an invasive pest?
I don't use the word invasive. I use the word travels, and this particular plant travels a lot at high speed. But invasive is so negative, and I just don't like that.
You're kind, and you've got another traveler here on the ground.
These are my crack plants, and this is mazes, and
Your crack plants.
crack because they're planted in the cracks, and they're really pretty strong. We walk on them a lot, but mazes is the one in bloom right now.
I love that mazes, the mazes reptans. I guess that's alba.
Yes, the alba, and then I have Laurentia. It has tiny little blue flowers, and then some white variety too.
If somebody wanted to try their hand at a formal garden, this would be a scale they could maybe manage.
Because it's so small, correct. And when you have a ground cover that travels, you're not constantly mulching.
And the fun thing about having annual beds is that you can try different things in different years.
Every year I like to change the plants. This year I was lucky enough to go to Charleston and brought back some annuals. When we go out of town, I think it's so fun to go to garden centers and look at the different plants in that area. Plants and shoes are my favorite things to shop for.
And the gates those are typical of a Charleston garden.
And when the gate is open, you're welcome to come in. So I like to keep it open a lot.
When I visited Mac Houfec's garden in Virginia Beach, I found her less formal back garden the perfect place to play with her 2 dogs. With such great companions, who wouldn't want to spend the day gardening?
My dogs are my buddies in the garden, particularly Moose. She's the chocolate lab. Moose is in chocolate mousse. And she follows me all around the garden. She learned one day she could jump the fence, and she does, and she opens the gate and closes the gate. If ever I'm planting or weeding, she sits right next to me. Misa is the Papillon, and thank goodness cannot jump the fence because she tends to like to play golf. And so we have to keep her inside of the gates. The neat thing about being back here is we're a few blocks from the ocean front, and it's hard to believe because it's so protected back here. I put in 2 pathways so that when the golfers come in the yard, they're really good about using the pathways, and so are the animals. We have a fox that frequents our garden, and the fox always walks on the stone pathway.
Oh, now come on,
I'm serious,
Mac.
Erica. It's a wonderful fox because he keeps the rabbit population down.
This hellebore right here, I love this bear's foot hellebore or Helleborus foetidus.
I love hellebores because it's an evergreen perennial, and anytime you can find and get an evergreen perennial, I always do. It's a 12-month deal. It's wonderful. The foliage is pretty.
Yep.
The blooms last for several months. Now
And look at the seeds, the seed
The
sets.
seed sets are really interesting, and these will stay on here and produce many seedlings, which you can share.
It's a good doer. It's easy to grow for most people. Even the beginning gardener can have success with this.
And then I have Disporum.
Oh, the Disporum is so pretty.
Okay, Disporum is one of those plants that I said I would not use the word invasive. So I'm just going to say that Disporum walks real fast, and but I like it.
It's
so it
invasive.
doesn't bother me, not if you like it. It has covered the hosta that's in here, and I'd love to give you some if you would like some, Erica.
I would love some, and it's because it's great for shade, and it's got that little variegation.
Right, it's great in arrangement, so my flower arranging friends tell me, and the bloom makes it interesting, even though the foliage is pretty.
That's the flower right there.
There's the flower.
Oh,
they
that's
look
so
like little
pretty.
bells. It looks like a Solomon seal,
Right.
only it's bunchier.
Now this will die back in the winter.
This dies
This
back.
is deciduous, but still you get this long season of growth.
Right.
It's kind of fun the way you have a big patch of euphorbia right in the middle of the Disporums and the hellebores.
I call this my red eye,
The red eye. It does have a red eye.
and it is Martini.
Martin spurge.
Martin spurge.
And how does this behave for you in Zone 8?
It behaves very nicely. It does not travel. It's standing up straight, and it's also a great cut flower.
Except now it does have a milky sap euphorbia.
It does.
Some
You have
people
to-
react to it, so you've got to wear gloves.
Exactly, and you have to, if you're going to use it in arrangements, you have to put it in extremely hot water.
What does it do the rest of the year? Because I've got some euphorbias, but I don't have this one.
These blooms will eventually turn brown, cut them off, and new ones are already on the way up. Yes,
Oh, okay.
It's continuous. It's a wonderful shade plant, and it does well in light sun too. I love to collect unusual plants, so I've been able to collect a lot of unusual plants for the shade. I get upset when I hear someone say, I can't garden, I can't grow that much because I have all shade. Well, my favorite plants can be grown in the shade. And if you want shade and don't have it, plant some, quote, trash trees, and you can have instant shade. This is the woodland garden. I love it because it's such low maintenance, and something is always coming up in it. Already hardy begonias are coming up for the summer. I love the ferns, the ostrich fern, tassel ferns, Japanese painted. They are one of my favorites. My frog collection kind of needed a home, so this became their home amid the ferns.
Lots of color with foliage.
Yes.
So you're not necessarily concentrating on blooms. You've got lots of interesting different foliage, big, small, little. You've got epimediums and ligularia. And the Japanese
Constable.
maple, the placement of that is beautiful with the golden creeping jenny underneath. This is really the focal point.
Featherleaf, Japanese maple.
It's kind of fun. I just noticed that the Selaginella is the same color as the creeping jenny.
Right. I tried to create a chartreuse and black garden here. And the black is the mondo grass, but the creeping jenny is taking over, and I'm constantly, sometimes I just sit in it and pull it off of the mondo.
Well, you're so good at turning plants that are usually, a lot of them are considered liabilities. You turn them into assets, just like the creeping jenny and the mazes.
And there's one in here that you're going to meet that's really, I will use the word invasive on it when I show it to you.
While exploring Mac Houfec's Virginia Beach garden, I took note of the clever way she used paths to link her various theme gardens. One of the paths led to an arbor covered with my favorite rose.
This garden is so inviting and really just lovely. There's just all this green, and the structure is so good, and this wonderful Lady Banks rose. I love the way it grows, and it has no thorns.
That's why I like it. I'm not crazy about thorns.
Did you put the fence up, or was the fence
The fence was here, and I put there's an akebia vine on here that just finished blooming, and it's quite fragrant, and so.
That's another aggressive plant.
That's-
Oh, I'm sorry. That's a plant that moves a lot.
That I prune frequently, yes, indeed. The advantage of plants that travel is that they grow quickly, and you can fill barren spaces in a hurry, especially if you're impatient like I sometimes am. The other advantage in plants that travel fast is that you can share them, and there are invasive plants that I think are not so bad, and then there are some that you have to plant with care. You just have to be careful because you don't want them coming out into the lawn and smothering other plants, and I am learning that still.
You've got all sorts of wonderful areas tucked away. There's lots of discovery in your garden. Right now we're in this wonderful little sort of corner nook with all these different color foliages.
This started out as my oriental room. It's a great example of what you can do in a small space with a lot of different variety. It's evolved into my burgundy and lime green garden, and the burgundy loropetalum I think is wonderful, the royal fern, and my favorites are the Jack in the pulpits, which
Jacks.
I look forward to Jack in the spring. It's fun to see him. I hate to mention this, but this is an example of another one of my traveling plants. And I'm gonna say invasive.
This is Peticides.
Peticides. Even though it travels a lot, friends come over and they just love it. And I do too, because the foliage is so pretty on it. And it's a great
beautiful
plant for an area that nothing will grow. And people that want something that grows fast, they're in a hurry, this is it. It's easy to contain. You just have to do it every day.
That doesn't make sense. Every day is not easy to contain.
My friends still want it. Even with all the warnings, they still like this plant.
And the variegation, just the touch of it's a variegated selection, obviously, looks so good next to that coleus.
The coleus is wine country, and it's one of my favorites. It's perfect in the red and burgundy. And again, this is wonderful if you want to cut it and take it inside. It is an evergreen, and it's this pretty. The blooms are long blooming. It's a long blooming plant, but the foliage is always this color, and it's wonderful.
Keeps the burgundy even in the hot summer sun.
This garden gets prettier as the season progresses. You know, it's beautiful in the summer when the ferns get bigger, the Solomon seal will continue to be green, and the Chinese silk plants get taller, and that's strictly a foliage plant.
That's a gorgeous foliage plant.
Isn't it pretty? It is one of my favorites. I say that a lot. They're all my favorites.
It's hard not to have a lot of favorites.
While visiting Mac Houfec's garden, I noticed how robust all the plants looked. I was surprised and pleased to learn that she gardens without the use of pesticides. Her method for controlling pests is simple.
I generally don't use pesticides. There are other ways to get rid of insects, and I try all of those ways first. I've cut the plant back. I can spray it with detergent and water. If none of those methods work, this plant's not that valuable to me. I mean, it's just not worth it. It gets demoted to the woods if it does not work in my garden.
You have a really good sense and understanding of scale. You've got these beautiful foster hollies that you've created as topiaries that really frame your side entrance but make it very welcoming.
Thank you. Just tried to add a little personality to the hollies. They were cone-shaped, but I wanted to give them a little more dimension.
They're architectural, so they really look good all year round.
Yeah, they do.
And you've got this informal area to balance a lot of your formal structures, like the topiary foster hollies. This beautiful combination with this brunnera.
Hadspin cream. This is one of my favorites because it starts out with this electric blue in the spring, and then through the season, these heart-shaped leaves just get larger and larger, and it's a really strong plant. I love it. And I love these colors together.
Yeah, I do. I like the platilla, and I also like the fact that you've got the straight hardy forget-me-not, which is Brunnera macrophylla. They have the same electric blue flowers as you describe them, and then that green foliage. It's a nice combination to have both the hadspin cream and the...
Thank you. This hosta, Erica, is called Great Expectations, and I learned about it on your show about a year ago. It's small because it's young, but it's going to be a really good hosta.
You have great expectations for it.
Yes, I do. And this, the indigo, it's a wonderful shrub. It's got a wisteria-like pink bloom.
Sure does, the Indigofera.
Indigofera, yes. And it's like this all spring and well into the summer. It's a great shrub.
These pillows of Deutzia nico, I have to comment because every plant in your garden is aggressive. These are supposed to be dwarf.
These are not, but they've been this size for a couple of years, so I think we're maxed out here on growth. But they're
is that
really
two?
lovely. They're
two different plants.
Males,
they really do. You feel as if you could sort of dive into them.
Sometimes Moose does, the dog. This time of year, every day when you walk out there, there's something new, and it's like a gift every day. And it's so rewarding to see what you've worked so hard for flourishing because of what you have done. And it's fun to share. I mean, it's so fun to trade plants with friends and to be able to give plants away. You know, gardening is a great gift.